Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a founder and SEO content strategist. I first used Trello and now have switched to Process Street. And if you'd like to see more reviews like this, click below. So, I originally used Trello as a project management tool. And for some of my clients, I used it as an editorial calendar. So, beyond just using it for task management and things like that, it was also a really great visual to see the production status of different topics that I was working on for different clients. But eventually, Trello became limited for my use cases. It has a great user interface, but it's more limited in terms of like the data it stores and what you can do with that data. So ultimately, what it came down to for me, switching from Trello and eventually landing on Process Street, was not just wanting a nice visual interface, but also being able to use that data more effectively and to be able to also loop in more members of my team to help with different aspects of production. With Trello, it probably could have been achieved, but with Process Street, I can get a lot more granular with role assignments and what people can see based on their roles, um, and other task management things. For me, I really see Trello as a great place to kind of store information, but Process Street as more of a tool that I can use to act on that information. Process Street is a process management tool, whereas other tools in the market you might call it more of a project management tool. And Process Street can work for project management too. That's what I use it for. But what makes it different from really anything else that I've ever used is the fact that it helps you to kind of attack a project from all the different angles, all the different roles, all the different individual tasks in a seamless way that works together so that there's no confusion about who should jump in when. Other project management tools, it's just hard to manage that aspect of it, making sure that people are coming in at the right time and not wasting their time by jumping in on a project where their task isn't actually ready yet. So for me, Process Street is just a great tool to create that seamlessness without having to oversee every step. And that's really why I ultimately chose it versus any other project management tool on the market. For me, especially in the industry that I operate in, I see Trello as a great tool for visually managing different aspects of a production process. In my case, it's content creation, but for you, it could be really anything that has multiple steps that perhaps multiple different people touch and things like that. Um, Trello, it's simple, and I think that's why a lot of people love it. It's very easy to dive in and get started, and you don't really need to read a lot of documentation to understand how it works and how to use it effectively. But I think the simplicity is also on the other side of the coin. The simplicity is where it pales in comparison to other project management tools. It is perhaps too simple once you get into more and more complicated workflows, or things like if you want to connect other apps to it that you're using as part of your workflow. It's really a great tool. It's just more, for me at least, like an early stage of my company tool. Getting started with either tool, you're luckily presented with a lot of templates. Both Trello and Process Street curate a library of templates so that you're not necessarily starting from a blank page. I think the other great thing about both of these tools is there are a lot of users, so there are a lot of resources out there. I'm not sure if Trello has a community. I know that Process Street does have a community on a platform like Circle or something like that where you can interact with other users, share your workflows, and things like that. I will say that Trello is probably significantly easier to get started with because it is a more popular tool and because it is built with simplicity in mind. Process Street is a little bit more overwhelming, I would say, to start with, just because even though there are these templates, you kind of are presented with a blank slate if you're trying to build a workflow from scratch. And so you have to keep that in mind that it's probably not going to work. Neither one of them is probably going to work perfectly for you right out of the box. It's going to take some time to think about how you want to use them. And how they can fit into your workflow or make your workflow better. So Trello wins in terms of ease of onboarding, but Process Street, once you get over that learning curve, is very straightforward. And it now that I've used it for over a year, probably more like 2 years now, for me, starting a new workflow takes mere minutes because I know exactly what I'm trying to get out of it after having experience working with it. So, when looking for a process or project management tool, I think some of the things that are most important to me that I've learned just through trying a lot of different ones is, first of all, some sort of way to communicate with your team, whether that's some sort of like Slack like chat or commenting or some other way that you can easily collaborate with files and tasks and things like that, have a back and forth. That's one thing. And what's interesting is that Process Street doesn't necessarily have that. They do have a commenting feature, but beyond that, there are no like forums or chats or anything like that. What is interesting about Process Street is that they have this new Pages feature, which is kind of like an intranet of sorts where you can add, in addition to like the workflows you're creating, you can add context for those things, additional research or details or logins or, whatever it is that you need to share with your team for them to complete the workflow. Something like Trello also has commenting. They don't necessarily have that like Pages intranet feature. And so really both of those tools are probably lacking a bit in the communications aspect, which is why my company also uses Slack and email and things like that to sort of try to make up for it. So perhaps the perfect project and process management tool or mix of features has not yet been created, but I think it's best always to use tools to what they're best at and not try to fit like a square peg in a round hole when it comes to even if they do have a communications feature, if it's just not working, it's better to use something that actually is good for that job. As far as other project management features that are important to me, it's things like being able to do role assignments. It's something that I already mentioned, but being able to get granular with that is important because not all tools will let you do that. They might have a parent task, but if you have child tasks of, the individual components, then it's harder to make sure that again people are jumping in at the right time and not wasting their time following a project that is not ready for them yet. Um, it's also things like how does it scale with when you add different users. My team is growing, and so whenever I'm evaluating software, I'm thinking about what cost is this going to add to my bottom line. And so with tools like Trello and Process Street, there are free aspects of them. And so they do scale nicely, just depending really on what you want to do with them and like what functionality you want your team to have access to. Are they building workflows or are they just interacting with them? That's kind of what affects the price, at least with Process Street. So I think all of those are good things to consider if you're in a similar position to me as me, where you're growing a team and you have to be thoughtful about how it's going to affect them too. I think another thing, and the last thing that I'll say is sometimes notifications can be crazy coming from different project management tools. Another video that I did actually for Capterra was talking about FreedCamp, and that was one that had some difficulties for me with notifications and trying to get those settings right and never really getting what I wanted. But I feel like I'm getting a lot closer with Process Street, and I think with Trello too. It's not like there's so many notifications that your inbox gets drowned in them. So a couple of things to consider. Hopefully that helps.